So I think this is the last event before the ultimate launch of the novel. I'd just like to say congratulations, great achievement. We know each other as poets, but I was really bowled over by what you achieved with this book. And that leads me to the first question. What inspired you to go down this track?
Well, I live in Celbridge, as you know, and Celbridge Abbey, being the home of Vanessa, was one time open to the public, and it had a playground which my two lads were more interested in than the house. And so when I was there was a lot of, a little bit of information about Swift and Vanessa. So I became intrigued with this, but I didn't have enough, I had only enough information to whet my appetite about them. So I decided to explore it. And I did that first through poetry, as you know. And then later I decided I'd try writing a novel, start a novel.
Brilliant, thank you. And how difficult was it to access the research?
Well, accessing it was, I wrote this years ago, so we're talking about pre-Google, when there wasn't as much information. So the National Library would have been my main source, and that involved, going into Dublin when I could, between work and, the usual domestic commitments. So there was no difficulty as such. You're just talking about the accessing it, or just
access it and then move on to the process.
Yeah. So I suppose then after that, it was about kind of getting the right information, because I knew I had a responsibility to maintaining historical accuracy, even though it was the work of fiction. So I had to have the proper resources.
Great, okay. And did you ever have any doubts about what you were setting out to do?
Maybe a few doubts, in the sense that I wanted to produce something that, was a genuine piece, and that, that everything in it is authentic.
Yeah.
And, I suppose when you're writing historical fiction, there's a certain amount of imagination, in that. But you couldn't throw in a mobile phone, let's say, into 18th century life. So I had to, take everything into account in that sense, and make sure that everything I spoke about in a historical context was absolutely accurate.
I think one of the most impressive things about this novel is the accuracy of the detail. I mean, there's a lot of detail there about what people are wearing, street scenes in London. I was really impressed by that.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Did you discover anything unusual in your research?
I did, actually, and it was a little bit unusual. I would have been maybe 2/3 of the way through the research. Initially, I just set out to write the story of the two of them, with no knowledge at that point that Swift had expressed the idea that their love story would be written. Okay. And that Vanessa also expressed that wish, her final wish, before she died, was that their letters would be published. And the novel has achieved that. So that was a very surprising moment.
Yeah.
And then there were a few other coincidences along the way. Some things that I wrote from imagination, because in between going into the library and that, I had to keep writing. So I had to kind of use my imagination to see what, in terms of the private world they inhabited. And some of the things I wrote about correlated eerily.
Yeah.
Well, I can't explain.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, how long would you say it took between your initial research and your final draft of this novel?
I suppose about 2 years, really.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's actually not so long, I think.
Felt long.
The land of novel writing.
Yeah, felt long.
At the back of the book, you list 7 books about Jonathan Swift, and there are none about Esther. How did you recreate the character of Esther? Was it solely based on her letters and, as you mentioned earlier, your use of your imagination?
Yeah, mostly through her letters. I got a lot. But in every book written about, most of the books written by Swift, there is an account of Vanessa.
Okay.
And Victoria Glendenning in particular gives a good account of her. So I took that and I, transposed the letters then after that.
Great, okay. And how difficult was it to get information on the Von Amridge's family, their lifestyle, mannerisms, pursuits, things like that?
Very difficult, because there's so little written about them. So what I did was I researched lifestyle of that time, food, entertainment, and I used that as a template for the Van Amridge. They wouldn't be too different than most people.
No, I think you achieved that, certainly. Sure. Considering the character of Vanessa, why do you think she tolerated Swift's abject neglect of her when she had so many other admirers?
Oh, I think he presented as this wonderful person. He was so intellectual, so accomplished. She would have been a bit in awe of him. He was very celebrated in literary terms. And she was a young girl. And so I think that was, and he was her tutor. So it wouldn't be that unusual for,
Okay, and she had an extremely boring life without him.
Yeah.
Although she had many suitors.
Yeah, she would have had. And he fed her, maybe her intellectual needs. Maybe.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So you don't believe then that Swift might have been intentionally cruel, do you?
I can't say for sure. I suspect there was a bit.
Okay.
But I think what happened was she was so clingy, to put it bluntly, she was constantly pleading with him to come and see her, and I think she annoyed him so much that his annoyance got the better of him.
Yeah, especially when she wrote to Stella.
Yeah.
That was the final straw. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Your use of extracts of Vanessa's original letters and Swift's diaries works very well. Why did you decide to do that?
Because letters and diaries are a way of, they're a pathway into the mind, into the inner self, more so than anything that someone will write to be published. So that's really...
Okay, great. Yeah. How did you come to create the minor characters, like Bessie the maid? Some of them work very well. Patrick, Swift's assistant, the younger siblings, they're all very well drawn. Yeah,
well, they all existed in reality. I'm particularly interested in Patrick.
Yeah.
And I think there's a novel in Patrick, Swift and Patrick, because Patrick was an Irishman and he loved his drink. And but he was a bit of a devil, because he used to get back at Swift over things, and he'd overfill the ink tub, and he'd hide so that when Swift lifted it, it would spill. And he'd hide his pen and paper and take the key and go out. So I love that, I have to say, and I'd love to have explored it further, but the story isn't about Swift and Patrick. Yeah. The next one will be next year.
You mentioned in the introduction that Swift was a man of contradictions. Yeah. Why do you think that was? Were there life events that shaped his character, do you think? Yeah,
he had a tricky kind of upbringing. Okay. His mother went to England for some reason and left him, and there was ambiguity about his father. in a time when illegitimacy was a stigma.
Yeah.
So I'd say he grew up in, from what I can gather from research, he grew up in a situation where the truth was never told.
Okay.
And I'd say his identity was a bit fluid, you know, in a sense that he didn't know who to believe. And also, he's also a very clever man, so he could come at things from multiple perspectives.
Okay.
You know, so I'd say most of us have contradictions.
Okay.
Most people are contradictory.
Yeah.
But the one thing I loved about him is that what I felt and what drew me to him was he didn't give two hoots what anyone thought. So he just acted on his own impulses, you know, so he wasn't trying to be somebody for society.
Yeah.
It just, yeah.
What role do you think Stella represented in his life?
Well, he was, as in his own words, exceedingly fond of her. But the one thing he stressed in his correspondences with her was friendship, friendship, friendship.
Yeah.
And he reiterated it so much that you'd question what was behind that.
Yeah.
And now it is rumoured that Sir John Temple was Swift's real father,
Yes.
and his son William Temple was Stella's father,
Yes.
which would make them uncle and aunt.
Half uncle, half niece.
Yeah, uncle and niece, yeah. So there was that, but that couldn't be verified.
Okay. Yes.
You know, in that time.
Yeah. And he was also very, very keen on climbing in society and retaining his place in society and having no scandal attached to that.
Yeah.
That was really important to him. Okay. Was it difficult to keep track of the historical elements of the story as you were writing?
Yeah, I suppose I did have to double back on myself, you know. I'd write something and go on a few chapters and then realise, oh, okay, no, I have to readdress that. So I found using a spreadsheet was the best.
All right.
I did that. Yeah.
Good idea. Okay. You're an experienced writer. How important was it to have had all that writing experience behind you before you started writing this?
Extremely, I think. Well, I might rephrase that question.
Rephrase the answer, rephrase the question. Okay.
If I could.
Yes, sure.
I might say, how important was it to have it published, maybe, rather than writing?
Fine, yeah.
I'm glad that the publishing is happening now rather than earlier. And it's a strange thing because, you know, years ago I might have chased publishing for publishing's sake. Whereas now I kind of feel I have something to say. And, you know, the it's just a different way of looking at it, you know. But to go back to your question, what did you actually ask me before I changed?
I asked you, as far as I remember, how important was it to have had a lot of experience of writing before you tackled this? But,
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it was important, and also I suppose I'd learned so much before that, and I'd learned how to do research, methodology, and all that kind of thing. So yeah, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to, because you know I learned the one thing I had to stick to consistently was historical accuracy, you know, and that was something I learned over the years. I wouldn't have known that maybe a lot.
Okay, great. Can we just talk a tiny bit about the publishing experience with Savoy Editions / Revival Press? To give you a bit of context, I was at an event where Nuala O'Connor was talking about having published her novel about Nora Joyce, called Nora. Penguin Random House published it, and she hit the New York Times bestseller list. But she said afterwards that subsequently she's published with New Island Press, which is a small Dublin press, and she found that the communication constantly with this bigger publishing house was difficult from the start. And there were a lot of assumptions she had to break down, and that took a lot of energy. And she found, being published by a smaller press that was Irish, that understood her, was much, much easier and more satisfactory in the end. And I'm just wondering what your experience was.
Yeah, well, I would agree with her on that. My experience with Dominic and Savoy edition was just absolutely wonderful. I couldn't fault them on anything. What happened was I sent, do you remember, Dominic? I sent you 3 chapters and you sent me the contract. So there was no waiting, and I signed the contract. And this was only in January, this January gone by.
Wow.
It works very quickly. But I do know, I've friends who've been with big publishing companies. It doesn't always work so well.
Yeah, what I found after I read it, and I read it a few times, your novel, that the characters stayed with me long after, and certain scenes stayed with me. So that's, in my estimation, an example of great writing. I just want to ask you, what would your final thoughts about the character of Jonathan Smith be now?
Right. He's. You'd probably need a PhD in psychology to understand him. He's like a dual personality. In the
multiple personality, maybe.
Yeah. He did so much good, and I think his greatest legacy is St. Patrick's Hospital. He's power of good for that. He was so generous to people, so charitable, and yet, at a personal level, he couldn't be charitable to
Vanessa.
But that's not unusual in people, really. That there is Carl Jung would say, the shadow self. That's sometimes reserved for one person. Sometimes, and it's an interesting thing to actually consider.
Yes.
That everyone can get the benefit of somebody's good nature, and then there could be one person that doesn't.
Yes.
And
for various reasons.
For various reasons. And Vanessa was that person.
Yeah. So that brings us to Vanessa, and Esther von Umbrage. Yeah. What would your final thoughts about her be?
Oh, poor Vanessa. She was. You'd have to pity her, but you also want to shake her.
Yeah, you do. Especially towards the end.
I just kind of feel, woman. He kept her on her toes.
Yeah.
But if I was her mother or her sister, I'd be saying, now listen, hold on a second. She'd be the other way around. But not necessarily, but that I was left with the feeling that I'd love to have met the older Vanessa, the woman who was more confident than the young girl or the young woman who let him dictate her life. And if she had lived, she died at 35.
Yes, I know that.
If she'd lived, would she have given him the high road?
I don't know, and it's hard to know when she moved back to Dublin for the last time. Did she actually cut her ties with London then? Because her mother had died, her sister was ill, I presume the brothers had married or had gone on to their own lives. So was there actually no alternative once she was in Dublin, that was where she had to stay, or go to Selbridge?
Yeah, Selbridge was, she had no choice in that. And it was a lonely life as well, because she was too gentrified for the locals.
Yes,
but also she didn't have people of her own class in Selbridge. at that time.
Yeah.
So she was very isolated.
Yeah. And the dreadful snobbery, you know, that you exposed so well. In Dublin, you know, she was suspect because everybody knew about Stella and Swift. And in London, they weren't well enough established. And she never took advantage of the suitors, you know. We do want to kind of tell her, get a suitor,
Yeah.
you know, have Swift on the side. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.